a favor, everybody just stand up if you don't mind. Let's just do this. Give yourself a little shake, get some energy in the room. Now, Dan doesn't know this, but today is Dan's birthday, so we're all going to sing happy birthday to him. Isn't that nice of him to be here on his birthday? So we're going to sing, when we get to the point, we're going to sing Happy Birthday Dan Riba, okay? Happy birthday to you again, okay? So everybody ready? I'm going to get the crowd too. I guess that means I haven't started, so let's, you have to trust my voice. Okay, everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. So great. Now at the end of the panel as well, we'll have you all gather in and we'll take a selfie with you guys in the background, okay?
I've got my wishes, so.
He wishes for my death right now. Not yet, not today. So, welcome to the panel again. It's Dan's birthday. So we're happy to have been able to bring him out to the show. First time in Denver, right?
First time in Denver.
So my name is James Fletcher. I run a company called Heroic Fine Art Gallery. So I sell a lot of framed comic book artwork, signed and limited editions, but I also sell animation cells. And I'm doing this for about 30 years. I'm blessed. I've gotten to know a lot of guys that worked on Batman the Animated Series and many other things, including comic book artists and everything else. But so how many? I guess this is our second year, but we only did two events or one event last year. I think maybe only LA.
I was only LA.
So we've done, I guess, 3 this year, and it's been good. It's been good. I am impressed by how many people know Dan Riba and his work. Because you kind of have to be an ultra nerd, I think, like me, to know, you know, how much he's directed, and a lot of people wouldn't even catch like all the things he's storyboarded and all that. So I thought we'd just start. Maybe we'll just go really basic. Why don't you tell them where you were born and where you grew up?
I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Alexandria and Arlington, Virginia.
Yes.
It's a nice little town to grow up in. Yeah. Wow, cool. Wow. And we actually, my brother collected comic books, and like Gary Groth, you know, from Fantagraphics is from the same town, and so there were little conventions there. I grew up with comics all my life, so I really loved that, and drawing, animation as well. So it was, and I went to school of visual arts in New York. And did you really? And it was, and Will Eisner was teaching at the time, and Art Spiegelman, Harvey Kurtzman was there. It was an extraordinary time to be there. So it was very formative.
So what took you from school out to animation? Like, how did that transpire?
I had decided during school that I'd rather do animation than comics, but I loved comics. It was always going to keep it as a backup kind of thing. But I really realized that I wanted to do animation. And a friend had already come out here, Barry Caldwell, who was a few years before, and had gone and started a storyboarding and filmation. So that's the thing. You want to storyboard because all the other jobs are going overseas, but storyboarding is always going to stay here, and that's the secure job. So I think, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll come out and do storyboards.
I know a lot of you have worked on the series, but I've spent time with other animators, and it's interesting the parallel, right, between the sequential storytelling of comic book artwork and storyboarding of animation.
It's very similar. It's the same sort of structures and the same things that you still have to learn how to place people in a room. The eye direction issues are a little different because in comics is a page direction. You're trying to lead the eye across a page, and in animation that's not as page. You know, you're dealing with real time, so things are different. And rules about screen direction are more adhered to in animation. Film, it's very important to see where things are going, what direction they're coming from, keep those things consistent. Comics, you can kind of play with that a little bit. Although you can always tell when an animator is doing a comic book because the screen direction flows better than somebody who doesn't do animation. That becomes so ingrained. Film storytelling becomes so ingrained that they still apply it to comics.
Tell them about your first animation job, how that came about, where you worked.
My very first gig was an in-between for Rick Reiner Productions, a small firm in Burbank, and I met a guy at a small comic show. It was a cartoonist sort of get-together, not like a mini convention at a mall. And I bumped into Scott Shaw, whose work I had seen before in comics, and he pointed me towards Dave Bennett, who was working at Rick Reiner, and they needed in-betweeners. And so I showed him my portfolio, and I was in between, in a week, I was in between for Winnie the Pooh and a day for Eeyore.
That's news to me today. So Scott, we can blame Scott Shaw.
Yeah, exactly.
For getting you. That's
Oh,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I remind him all the time, every time I see him, that, yeah, you're the guy that got me into business. So,
Interesting.
and then after that there was a little dry spell. It was like the seasons were over. Animation was very seasonal back then because of the way they the shows are on in the fall, they start in the spring, and so my job was over in like November, December, and there was nothing in animation going on. And strike had just ended, but things were still kind of getting going and not really started yet. So I interviewed with Filmation, and they liked my stuff, but they didn't have any scripts, any shows greenlit yet. And then Ruby Spears was hiring, and John Gorman interviewed me, hired me, and that was the greatest place to work. I mean, we did
Filmation or Ruby Spears?
Ruby Spears.
Now, did those jobs overlap, or did?
No, I never worked at Filmation.
Oh, you did.
They called me after I'd already gotten a job at Ruby Spears. But the thing about Ruby Spears was Jack Kirby was doing their designs, and Doug Wilding, who had created Johnny Quest, a show that was really formative to me when I was a kid. And so I got to know them pretty well. I mean, Doug very well. Kirby less so, but I saw him frequently. So I was inking his presentations, and that was like, holy cow, very daunting.
Didn't Ruby Spears in the late 80s, didn't they do a Superman? And then a lot of, I remember seeing presentations based on like Gil Kane.
Gil Kane was at that time, Gil Kane started doing a lot more stuff with them, and became friends with the crew. Don't find them a lot. And it was fun. It was a cool thing. I wasn't there at that point. I had gone to Deke at that point, and then so I was
From Ruby Spears.
Yeah.
So, again, the first one was, what was your first job again?
My first job was Winnie the Pooh and the Day for Eeyore. The second job was Ruby Spears, and it's sort of like, and everything in Ruby Spears was like Mr. T, Turbo T, Pumpkin's New Adventures, shows that are just like.
We remember fondly, and then we watch them again, and as we get older, we're like, how did we like this?
But we had so much fun. It was crazy. It was madness. And in fact, our crew was so crazy that they put us in a different building to stay away from because the problem was great because we were just so out of control. And it was a great, because you just let off steam because you're working on shows that are not that great. And you're trying to do professional work and try to get the job done, but you also have to let off steam because it's not great.
So by the time you get to Deke, how many years have you been working in the field?
It's about a year and a half.
Is that all? So it happened very quickly.
Yeah. And then at Deke, I was storyboarding. I had bumped into Kevin at an event where Doug Wilding was speaking at Kevin
Altieri, yes.
And he was speaking at the American Comic Book Company. There's a comic book shop that actually previously, Scott Shaw had worked there, but Doug Wildey was doing an appearance there. And so he asked me, demanded that I show up, and I did this thing. And so I did. And it was kind of funny, actually. At the San Diego Con, I went with a friend because he was such a big Johnny Quest fan. He wanted to meet Doug Wildey. We got to the convention late. I had already missed his panel. I think he's probably, he's somewhere. He's missing mine. And so he was so mad at me that when he saw me, he was like, Dan Riba, you son of a gun, you missed my panel. Don't talk to me. And I was like about to introduce this friend, and he was like, no, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you today. Go away. And I was like almost in tears. I was like, I'm so sorry, Jay, I let you down. I wanted to introduce you to this guy. And he just stared at me. He's like, Dan, you see him too wildly. I thought like a guy in the hall or something. He knows your name. He knows who you are. He hates you. And I was like, oh yeah. And he actually did, he didn't hate me. We went to lunch one time and he introduced me to Dave Stevens when he was turning in a piece of artwork for the Rocketeer. And I couldn't say anything because I was sitting with Cliff and Peavy. And it wasn't just like two guys that are artists. It was like, this is the real deal. I was so in awe of him as an artist, but it was so weird and freaky seeing them together.
Yeah, a lot of legends you came across too, in the early days especially. Well, tell them a little bit about what you worked on at Geek.
When I first started, I was on Kid Video with Kevin and Eddie Fitzgerald, who I later worked with at Warner's, and so they were working on Kid Video, which is a really wild show, and it was animated at a place called TMS, which we all know how great that place is, and we became friends with their animation director, Hirakawa, who was a genius. He had actually previously had worked on a film that I saw at the World Science Fiction Convention, Lensman, and he animated, he directed the CG animation in that film. So I was pretty much in awe of the guy, and then we were working with him, and he was mentoring us, and I became friends with him. He showed me around in Japan when I worked for Deep there, and it was pretty wild.
What else did he? Was it just Kid Video?
No, well, eventually, I went to Japan for 3 months to work on lip sync retakes, because at that time they were sensitive because the Japanese didn't know how to do the lip sync mouthing because they don't do that traditionally. They animate the mouths first and then put the voices in after, whereas we don't do that here. We do the voices and animate to the voices. So there was like some growing pains. They had to learn how to do this, and so they had a department of American and Canadian animators over there that would retake the mouth movements. And I did that for 3 months, but I got to go to visit all these animation studios. I met a guy who had animated an entire episode of Thundercats with like 2 animation assistants, and he just would, it was amazing. This guy at his own home would animate the whole show. And then I got to see the TMS studio and see what they were actually animating panels that I had storyboarded, and it was surreal. It was really cool. And that was neat because I ended up eventually working at TMS.
So you're learning as you go as your career starting. Do you, at any point or in this time frame, feel like you're competent, like you're reasonably confident in what you're doing, or how did that go?
No. I always felt like I was always absorbing, learning. I never felt good enough yet, And then little by little, you have to, because the producer was like, he was directing everything that he was producing, so he didn't, it was like we were all doing our own things. But eventually, I directed a thing over 2 weeks over a weekend, mainly, and it was like this little thing that didn't sell, but the little promo was 3 minutes, and we got it out the door in 3 weeks. And we did the board, we did all the character designs and backgrounds months, and we got it out the door, and animation came back in just a few weeks, and it was really good. So they were, okay, this guy can work with artists, he can work with boards, he can do this. So I was at that point the director. So then when Richard was promoted after Alf, which was the show we did after Ghostbusters, I got to direct the second season of Alf.
Okay, so give them like in a nutshell like what you worked on, like from Deep and between Deep and Batman. So just name off some of the series you worked on.
It started with Kid Video, and then in order to save my job, I was sent to Japan because they needed an animator, and I knew how to read exposure sheets, and I could animate a little bit because I learned in school. I had in between the movies, so they were like, okay, it's good enough, you can go to Japan. So I stayed there for 3 months, and while I was there, they were developing Ghostbusters back in the States, the real Ghostbusters. And I had actually visited the sets because my brother worked at Warner Brothers, and so I and Ruby Spears, I knew Tom Enriquez who did the storyboards and designed Slimer when he was the Onion Head, and I'd seen the scripts, and I was like really immersed in Ghostbusters before it even came out. So it was really appropriate for me to be working on the show. And eventually, because of the way that show was kind of cranked out, we were working on the network series, had doing boards for that, and in between we worked on a syndicated show, and I was doing character designs, which were being really like cranked down. So that was nuts. Really factory stuff, but it was still creative and fun. So.
One after Ghostbusters.
And then after Ghostbusters, we worked on, let's see, Starcom was one. That was this really great space show that at some point we decided to base the main characters on Kevin. John Calmette was the villain. Ted Blackman was one of the characters called Crowbar. They were all stylized versions of ourselves because the toy company had great toys. It was a Matchbox thing. It was so great. And we got a 65 half-hour deal, and they wanted to do it like 5-story arcs. 13 story arcs with 5 episodes each, and to tell one story. And at one point they decided that the toys weren't going to sell, so they pulled the show. And he threatened to sue because we had all those scripts and people designing and stuff, and so they agreed to just do 13 episodes. And so that's why we don't see Starcom a whole lot. It was like syndicated and shown on Sunday mornings in certain places around the country. But it was a really cool show. I think they're all on YouTube, so it's a really cool science fiction show. And the toys were great. I don't know why the toy company pulled out, because everybody I know who owned one loved them. And then after Starcom, we did Cops, which was another toy-based show, and that was really fun. Cops was a blast. Peter Chung came aboard to help with character designs and animation supervision, and he boarded the title sequence, which was really cool. The animatic for that was amazing, and then he went overseas. He went to Korea to supervise. So it was a really fun show. And we just did, for that show, we would do like the preliminary boards, and then send them overseas to do. So we didn't like work on that many episodes. We just kind of like did the first few episodes after we started getting ball rolling. And then let's see what was there after Cops. Then Alf came along because the TV show was a big hit, and so we got that to do. And then I became a director after that.
Like on Alf or after Alf?
On Alf. I became a director of the second season. And Kevin directed Alf Tales.
Okay.
And Kevin was already kind of like really co-directing everything anyway. He was a storyboard supervisor for most of the shows while we were working on. And then I got a call to work on Super Mario Brothers. And so that was a show that was another show that was sort of cracked out really fast. And it was wild because I loved the designs, the games were fun. I wanted to go like old school and make it look like a Fleischer kind of thing. And because I saw that's when I got the designs from Nintendo, I kind of saw early animation with that. So we gave them iPad eyes and made it feel even more so. And Nintendo seemed happy with that. I actually wanted to eliminate a absolutely adamant that we could not do that. I showed them examples of Tezuka where he did the three-fingered hands, and they were like, we don't do that here. And it's really because of the Yakuza. There's a stigma about people with missing fingers, that it has a different connotation in Japan than it does here. So even though, Mickey Mouse and all these, animated characters have it, they're just like, no, we don't do that here. So he had all his fingers.
And I know we're going kind of rapid fire, but I love listening to these guys talk about their careers because if you catch some of the names we're going through, so Kevin Altieri, you already had a lot of contact with. Was anybody here last year at Kevin Altieri's panel? So he was here, and so you're already working a little bit with him. And then John Calmette, you mentioned, who did a lot of beautiful paintings for Batman the Animated Series, a lot of backgrounds and things like that.
He did the iconic logo, the Batman, he painted that. Bruce drew it, but John actually painted that.
Actually, a beautiful painting of that final shot of the intro with we're standing on the building and the lightning bolt goes by, and that's John. Just so you're familiar. So, anything else you want to fill in before we hit, the Batman?
Let's see. So after Super Mario Brothers, I got a call from Richard, who had left Deke and had gotten a job at TMS, and they were developing a TV series version of the Little Nemo and Slumberland movie. So that was one of those things where I always loved the comic strip, and it was a big deal, and it was a really cool movie we saw while we were there. And so when I got aboard, Kevin had already boarded a promo for the project. That was really cool, but they kind of wanted to push it even further into a little more comedic area. So we just spent a lot of time developing that, and then at one point, Ron Howard wanted to release the film in the United States, but he wanted to change it. He wanted to edit it, he had some notes on it, and so we were actually going through trying to figure out how to give the story a better through line, to have stuff that made sense, because it didn't seem like there was any kind of motivation for stuff to happen. Just kind of like the comics where stuff happens and then he wakes up. And it wasn't like a real sense of a story that had a moral or any sense of character interaction with what was going on. So we kind of tried to do that, and worked on that for about a month, maybe two, and then the heads of TMS were like, no way, we can't sink another dollar in this movie, it's going to be released as it is, and that's that. So that's what happened there, but then we got back on the series, and they tried to sell it to Fox, but they had already developed a Peter Pan and the Pirates series, and they just thought the similarities were too great with Slumberland and Neverland, and their pilot that they had done for Nemo had pirates in it, so they just thought it was too close. So they actually pretended that they were going to bid on it, but they really wanted to shut it away and not let anybody see it or buy it. They were just going to put a bid on it just to keep it out of it. That was the way we saw it, and so they said the TMS said no, and the fellas in Japan were upset. And so they were like, look, you almost sold it. You said no, how could you do that? And they shut it all down. And it was the best thing to ever happen to me, because I had already seen a promo that Bruce and Eric had done for Batman the Animated Series. And I always felt like, oh my gosh, if this thing sells, I can't leave. I can't go work on Batman. This is going to be horrible. And then we get the news that this show is over. And then I get a call from Kevin. And he's like, guess what? We're doing a Batman series. And it's just like the Fleischers. And I was like, yeah, Kevin, I've seen the promo. It was bootlegged. I'm all over animation at that point. So, and I actually knew Bruce a little bit because he had worked a little bit on Cops. And I think he was on Ghostbusters a little bit. And on Media Cecil when they were doing that at Deke. And I would just stare at him. Not him, actually, but his work. But it was still creepy because because I'd stare over his shoulder and watch him draw, and I'm like, you mind? And he's like, smoking, knock yourself out. Because it was unbelievable to see how he worked. His storyboards were incredible, just so beautiful. It was like Bollywood, you know. It just, oh my gosh, it was such a joy to see. And so when I heard that he was doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's in the right hands. So I interviewed Bruce. I don't know if you remembered me like staring at him drawing the boards, but you know, he hired me anyway. And I wanted to storyboard originally, but they were because I already even though I had directed, I was getting ready to get married, and I knew what a job directing entails. It's big, it's massive, and I knew it was going to be a big deal, and I wasn't going to be able to take the time. So I just asked to be a board artist, and then instead he's like, yeah, we got those. We need a character designer. And my first day, I designed the security guard that gets thrown out the window with Manpad. I designed the pilots, the balloon pilots, and I worked on Manpad because he wasn't happy with what he was getting. And he had this really cool monster shape, and I kind of echoed it. And I insisted on having his hands become his wings because I never liked the way in the comics it just felt that his wrists, it just felt there was no anatomy there. So I was really insistent. Bruce was like, yeah, that sounds okay. We'll do that. And so little sketches about how the fingers would work in licking into the wings. And but he wasn't crazy about what he was doing. He wasn't crazy about what I was doing. It just wasn't quite there yet. And then Mike Kim came along and he nailed it. So we were like, okay, this is the thing. But it was all kind of based on what we were doing. So I feel like I have a hand in what we're doing with Mandat.
So what's some of your favorite work from Batman that you directed or something?
Yeah. Let's see, boy. There was like a lot of fun stuff that I didn't have as much control over, like cleaning up Bruce's Joker fish, or cleaning up Kevin's board. You know, in the very beginning, it was just like we were creating this new language for how to do a superhero cartoon, and that stuff was really awesome. But then directing, I really love the fact that when I got my first show by itself, I was Light as a Bat was my first episode, and I saw the script, and it kind of bothered me that Bruce Wayne was building weapons for the military. It didn't seem like it. At that time, I didn't think, Bruce Wayne would be doing that. He was scared of guns. He didn't like guns. He didn't use them. And I thought, why would he be making them for the military? He's not Tony Stark. So I mentioned this to Alan, and it was part of the story. But it was like, we could not do that. But he just put a line in there to address that. And I was so pleased that I wasn't like ignoring. I had input, and it actually, I think, gave the show a little more of a meaning. So I was pretty happy right from the get-go that I was collaborating already, and that was neat. And then, boy, when I got to do, then we got to do the Invisible Man show, and that was really fun. The See No Evil, and that was really a blast. And then Baby Doll was like the one that really kind of had the most impact for me. I really loved that episode. And that still resonates with people. And it did with us while we were working on it.
That's very powerful. So, Mask of the Phantom a little bit before that, right? Before some of your episodes like Baby Doll or...
Right. We finished the first 65, and I came on very late. The way I got on as a director was that I was character designing and occasionally pinching boards here and there for Eric Radomski. I worked on the first Riddler show, and I did a little bit for POV, and I did little boards here and there for people. But I was primarily doing turnarounds and characters that Bruce had designed, or interesting characters, didn't want to do Batman anymore. And I think it's crazy, but that was his thing. He didn't want to leave. So Kevin talked to Ann Lighting about giving me a promotion and having me direct. It's like, Kevin, Dan's done this. He's done this a long time. He can handle this. This is fine. And they were really supportive, and they let me finish off Satana. So I finished the board on that, and then worked on layouts for the What is Reality show for the Riddler. And they just like threw me right in. And not only that, but I got to edit shows that came in, big shows that came in. Robin's Reckoning, I got first pass working with the editor, and that was incredible. And that editing is an amazing part of the process. It's really fun. He was nuts, right? But it was great for me because I got to finish off his last few shows. And so that's why I kind of came in on the tail end, because I was replacing somebody. So I got, let's see, Lightnings of Bat, Fire from Olympus, See No Evil,
Girl Returns.
Batgirl Returns. And Batgirl Returns was a lot of fun.
Beautiful. So the animation was...
It's real nice. It's real nice. So that was a fun one. And so that was a fun show.
So Batgirl Returns kind of takes us to the end of the early episodes.
That was the last of the first 65.
So what happens with you between that time and when you pick up again on or did you go right into...
Right into Mask of the Phantasm. Because as soon as we finished that, we got word that they wanted to do a feature of the series. And so there was like some talk about what the plots would be. And I actually suggested, how about an episode where Batman has to go and goes to Arkham. And I didn't even get a chance to say it out loud, because as I was suggesting, I was writing down this idea about Batman getting stuck in Arkham and having a trial. Paul had come up with it, and he'd already worked out the whole thing, so he had trial already worked out, and that was his idea for the feature. But Alan had this thing called Masks, what he called it, and it was this sort of the Citizen Kane of Batman origins. It was all encompassing, this idea of how the thing that he really wanted was a story that tells the origin in a way that makes it a tragedy when he puts on the mask. That the sacrifice that Batman is making to be Batman is really great. And that's never, we always see that depicted as some heroic moment. And he thought, oh no, this is actually really, really sad. He had this vow that he made as a child, and he kept it all his life, and it made a big impression. He could have had a different life, but he stuck to his guns, and so he created this whole storyline for that, and it was awesome. And of course, it was the best idea, and of course, we had to do it. So, in order to get it out the door, because originally it was going to be direct to video, we had to treat it like several episodes, and so they broke down the script, alphabetized it, and gave each director a chunk to direct, and the board artist chunks to work on, and even the writing actually was even written like that. It was broken up into little installments, and people wrote different chunks of it, and Alan supervised all of that writing, and just like Bruce was supervising all of the boards, and it was really neat.
Well, a lot of people love Mask of the Phantasm, right? It's kind of a definitive Batman film. Yeah. So you complete Mask of the Phantasm, and do you work on anything in between that and what becomes, Superman and then the new Batman Adventures? And
So what happens in Mask of the Phantasm then leads into the Adventures of Batman and Robin. It's a pickup, and that first 65 episodes, we thought, okay, that's a lot. They're never going to ask for more. Well, they asked for 20 more, but they insisted that Robin be in all of them because they didn't think it was enough for the first 65. And so we had a title sequence because they wanted to make that clear. Bruce wasn't happy about the title sequence because he just But we got to use a Shirley Walker theme that was really nice. That we love Shirley, we love that theme, and that was title sequence is great, and the Danny Elfman music is wonderful, but it really kind of ties to the movie Batman more than the cartoon. So, which had a theme that worked for us. That was the one that we tended to use in the body of the shows more than the other one. And that became the theme for the Batman and Robin series.
So you have some work on those. Some of your episodes are in that 20.
Oh yeah.
And then how do you transition in between that and
what next? What next?
What next?
So as what happens next is that Warner Brothers starts their own network, and they realize Fox has got a good thing going, and so they want to get into that business, and they even want to get into the kids business, so they created a network, like a network block, Kids WB, and they need programming for it. And Gene McCurdy is in charge. So it's great because your boss now is like a big boss. Now she's a network head. So, but we don't have Batman. We can't use Batman because Batman is still on Fox. That the license hasn't gone through yet. They have to keep running all the episodes a certain number of times. And they can only get it back after it stops running. So instead, and then it turns out that the idea of Superman was already floating, but what happened was that Steven Spielberg wanted to still be involved with Warner Brothers. And he liked Batman, so he said, gee, I want to do a superhero show. But, lighter the tone, and maybe kind of funny. So
nothing like Batman.
No, so nothing like Batman. So Bruce came up with Freakazoid, and we were having fun working on that. He Paul had come up with some really cool ideas, that was really creative. It was so funny, but in fact, I had a meeting with Walter Koenig, Chekhov. I got to drive him home from a meeting with Gene. He was pitching something. And I said a bunch of really stupid things and came back to report them to Paul and Bruce. They wrote them all down. Paul put them in a show, and that Fanboy is his name, is really me. And I had this really surreal moment where they asked Mark Hamill to do a part in it. They had a whole bit about with Mark Hamill in it. And I was watching this episode in San Diego on a big screen over the DC booth, and Mark Hamill had just written The Black Pearl, and he was in the Dark Horse. He was at the Dark Horse booth right next door, and there's this episode that I inspired, and there's the guy that's in it as a cartoon on the stage, and it was bizarre art. Imitating life imitating art, all in one moment. It was really magic. It was the greatest moment in my life.
Besides being here.
Oh, yes. Besides hearing it first. And so that Freakazoid, and then what happened was that Spielberg ended up not really liking everything that he was seeing, and eventually Tom Hooper took over the show. Because he really turned out he wanted Animaniacs in tights, essentially. And we didn't really, Bruce kind of doesn't do that. He didn't really get that kind of humor, so he kind of bowed out in order to develop Superman. So the first season of the Kids WB doesn't have a Superman. But, so I worked on Freakazoid, it was really fun, but as soon as Bruce started going with Superman, we were going crazy developing stuff on it.
So by this time in your career, how are you feeling as far as how it's progressed?
I'm pretty confident at this point.
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm doing fine.
Well, by this point, you're already, not quite, you're getting closer to the time where you're having Emmy consideration and things like that. Tell them about what Emmys you won. You're nominated for many.
Well, that was the thing where that year, the first year of Superman, Freakazoid got nominated for, Batman had gotten, a primetime Emmy and a ton of nominations, but but I wasn't involved in those at the time. It was like, and the way that the primetime Emmys were, it was like only the show that submitted gets the Emmy. So Dick Sebast, who left, he got his Emmy for Robin's Reckoning, Part 1. And it was well deserved. It was a great show. But I edited it. I'm sure you did
But you had your time.
But I had it.
Right. So you
So-
won one for Freakazoid.
Well, the thing that happens is like Freakazoid gets nominated, but then so does Superman. So I had the honor of being nominated twice in 1 year, which is like I was competing against myself. I didn't know which table to sit at the Emmys because we were like, I was kind of rooting for Superman because but I love Freakazoid too. It was a lot of fun, and so when it won, I was like, well, guys, if you really cut out, get up there. So I went out, with all the other directors and writers, and it was great. It was really great, but still, I wanted to. But
We got a couple more after that.
But then the next year, well, it wasn't the next year because it was the year that Batman came back.
That's a new Batman.
That's a new Batman.
Part of the Superman Batman.
Exactly. We did 30-something episodes of Superman, and Warner Brothers got the rights back to do Batman. And so it was sort of redesigned a little bit based on things that we learned from Superman, how to make more consistent, better animation, and also to differentiate it from the Fox show. So that we kind of kicked up the style a little bit, and then World's Finest was phenomenal. It was done in Japan by Japanese artists that were really incredible, supervising, in fact, the secret that we had at the time was that TMS farmed out the second part to Ghibli, the Miyazaki studio, and that we weren't allowed to talk about that. That was sort of like, shh, don't tell anybody. And then it turns out that the credits of the episode actually have all the Ghibli animators. So there was no secret. For anyone who knows the names of these animators, it was an open secret, but they told us not to tell anybody because, I don't know. So forever I'm like, oh, do you know? And it's like some people do already. Okay. But then Superman and Batman Adventures gets nominated, and I get another Emmy for that. So that was my second Emmy. And then that runs its course because we're doing those shows, and then Jimmy Kellner gets into WB, and Warner's and Kids WB, and he gets a thing about wanting teenagers being stars of all the shows. That's like their whole focus, like Buffy and everything is like, let's do teenage shows, everything is teenage-driven show. So, like, we want a teenage Batman, and it's like, what are you talking about? How can you do a teenage Batman? And they're like, well, we can have adventures with Bruce Wayne before he's Batman, and he can be like roaming around the world. It's like, but then it's not a Batman show. We can't do that. And so Bruce thought, well, what if it's in the future? What if it's another person that's Batman? And Bruce Wayne's there to mentor them. And they're like, well, that's different. That's interesting. We got our teenage Batman that way. Okay. And Bruce and Paul and Alan were kind of like leaving the meeting and not sure of whether or not this is even a great idea. But Bruce draws this really cool, old Bruce Wayne. I mean, the original version was like, he was just gnarly. It was like Boris Karloff. He had this kind of wide eye and a scar over with it. And he's just like, And so, in which we dusted off in epilogue eventually, but we still gave him the normal line, but he just let that really old red. That was the version in that we used in that one. But he brought that, and the crew, when he's telling the story, everyone was kind of going, no, maybe. Glenn Murakami was the first to go, this is going to be this is great, we have a chance to reinvent everything. He had the city, he kind of worked out ideas of how to do the city, and that drawing of Bruce Wayne is what sold everybody. Suddenly, the entire crew is now behind the show, and we're all going, oh, this is actually a great idea. you know, we took this idea and it was like, and really like made something awesome out of it. And it wasn't loved at first by everybody because, you know, nobody wants something new. You want to see what you're familiar with. So I would get a lot of hate at conventions that I was on Batman Beyond. And, you know, yeah. This one guy was like, oh, you did Batgirl Returns? That's my favorite episode. Oh my gosh, you gotta do more Batgirls. Is there any chance? And I'm like, well, we're working on Batman Beyond now. Oh, I hate that show.
And here we are 25 years later this year. So.
And, you know, they got love eventually.
So we're coming close to the clock here, so I should just open the floor. As you can see, we can talk for hours, and hopefully we haven't bored you, but like, he has an amazing career, and this only gets us to 25 years ago with Batman Beyond, but let's have a couple of questions before it kicks out. Go ahead.
I just was wondering, does DC would they ever come to you in terms of like, we saw the Batman Beyond movie that they were working on at one point, or like a Superman project, or like a Batman project, or like a big screen, would they come to you for
No, they wouldn't come to us. No, they had to have to go to their feature people. They had to they compartmentalize things. So
I should, because your stuff is great.
Thank you. Although James Gunn is more involved in animation now, and he does, you know, yeah, there's more. There is more involvement.
So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, Dan. I'm not sure if one of our other snipers up there, so I don't know if you can exactly talk about what it was you had showed me yesterday when I came up to your booth. But I wanted to ask, of all the things that you have worked on in your career, what's something that you would have wanted the most to not have ended up on the cutting room floor?
Oh dear. Oh my gosh. That's an interesting question because I don't really, I can't think of, you know, generally things are on the cutting room floor it's for a reason. You know, I don't really, you know, I storyboarded a section of POV that the network objected to, and they were right. So I'm feeling like I'm actually really glad that they objected to it because I accidentally boarded something that was sort of a little more intense than I intended in a way that I didn't intend it to be intense. Let me put it that way. And so I was sort of like after the fact, going, oh my gosh, that was a good call from that censor. Little things like characters we weren't allowed to use. It's not so much cutting room floor, but things like, you know, Blue Beetle on Justice League or Vertigo characters we weren't allowed to use. Neil Gaiman had actually talked to Paul about doing a Sandman episode, and Bruce kind of like put the kibosh on that because he didn't want any more Drake episodes. We had so many. And then Paul came up with Over the Edge, and Bruce had to do that because that's the best show we've ever done. That was awesome. And so, maybe there was a joke that we did in Justice League that didn't get used. You know, that we were going to have in the great brain robbery, we were going to have the Flash reference the Legion of Doom, and folks in DC thought that was too on the nose, too super friends, and so no, let's cut that. I thought it was such a funny line, and it really would have worked great. So I regret that. But in terms of like any big chunk of stuff, I mean, Kevin boarded stuff on Mask of the Phantasm that got cut out that was like blood stuff doing it, you know, and it was like, and it was more intense and it was cooler, but it didn't ruin the movie by cutting it. It wasn't like one of those things where it's like, oh, I didn't have a whole lot of that on my shows. It was like, you know, it was an interesting question though. And I'll probably think of one after today.
Thank you very much.
Right, we'll have to give as short answers as possible.
I know, that's good.
Not that we don't like it, but go ahead.
Right. My question is on animation related. I'm trying to train myself to draw. I'm trying to rebuild my art portfolio. What seems the best method to try to rebuild an art portfolio when you're trying to get into the business of animation?
Honestly, I can't tell you. I mean, I know drawing everything, drawing really well helps, drawing from life really helps. But now the standards are so different, and most of the shows are not really interested in making something beautiful. They kind of want to go, everything is sort of ugly. And so the aesthetics that we had when we were starting, all the things that we were trained, the Preston Blair book, all the stuff that I would steer people towards, do this, it doesn't mean anything now, because so much of animation is kind of ugly. So I think learning how to draw, feeling comfortable with life drawing and different styles, just push the idea of like, look at different things, try to draw different styles, and you'll hit something that will appeal. But I don't know what to say, because the world, the industry is like so completely different than it was.
Thank you for your time.
Sorry.
My question, hopefully it's not too long, but the effects of AI in the animation industry.
It's too early to tell.
Okay.
It's too early to tell. I mean, I heard Winnie the Pooh that's going to be done with AI stuff, because it's now in public domain. And of course, Andy Higwood was doing that, where it was a geek. And it's like, well, it just seems like an easy cash grab thing, and we'll see, how it does, but it's too early to tell. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to affect. I think that industry people want to invest in it. I don't think it's there yet. I don't think it's going to be something that we have to worry about in the next 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but maybe 20 years. It'll be like loving more of it. So,
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, let's do this. I think we can get through the last 4 or 5 here.
So my question is, what was, from your Warner Brothers catalog, what was your favorite episode that you've done, and then what is your most challenging episode?
oh boy. Too many episodes to do, so it's sort of like, for Justice League, there's so many, like the Justice Guild episode and Clash was one that I really had a lot of meaning for me, because I love Captain Marvel. So, Shazam, I'm sorry, but Captain Marvel, I know him as Captain Marvel. So, we called him that in the show, so I get to say that. But Baby Doll really was one of the ones that really resonates with people the most, I think. And I really found it really fulfilling at the time. So,
Did you guys do
probably that one.
for the Denver?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So your work is widely regarded as the golden age of DC animation. Superman, Justice League, Batman the Animated Series. Do you think we'll be able to have another golden age of DC animation within the next maybe 5 or 10 years, depending on just how live action movies play out and stuff like that?
I don't know. It's hard to
There's
say.
only one goal.
There's only one. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it works that way. I know Disney came back and after kind of being in a little bit of a rut, they came back with Little Mermaid and Lion King and all this stuff, and they kind of had a rebirth. I don't think it's going to work that way with this. It's like there are going to be individual shows that are going to appeal to people. I think the market is different. I don't think it's that way. I mean, I hope so. I want that to happen. But I don't think when Cape Crusader comes out, and it's going to be great, it's going to be fantastic. I know it will. I haven't seen any. I'm just on faith. I know these people. They're brilliant. So it's going to be great. But it's one of those things where I don't know how much. We've already had the influences. It's like, how does it won't change things because we've already seen these things before. So I don't know if, they've been doing a whole bunch of videos, and I don't think it's going to have that same resonance. There's only one golden age. It's like you said, it's not really.
Fair enough. Thank you for your time.
Hi. I grew up watching Justice League, Teen Titans. Essentially, Batman and DC is what got me into animation. I'm really obsessed with it. So I was curious, what is the process of taking so many complex characters and the complex universe of DC and comics and transforming it into animation, having to make choices, having Wally West as Flash instead of Barry Allen,
Right.
or little like choosing which Green Lantern, like how are you teaming people up? I'm just curious about that process.
It's all sort of based on different things at different times. But in the case of Wally West, I think he was predominantly like the main Flash at the time. Barry Allen hadn't really come back yet, so it was like he has to be Wally because that was the case at the time. And but in terms of like John Stewart, we just wanted different types of people, different types of personalities. And contrast. It's not diversity so much of race and gender, but diversity in terms of personalities, contrasting, that makes a more interesting show. So there was those choices were made. I mean, Bruce was going to do Justice League. He actually pitched Justice League before Superman because he didn't know if he could do a Superman show. He just had the Ruby Spears one, just like a few years before, and he didn't know if he could do something fresh with it. So he's like, I want to do Superman and the Justice League, and both DC and Warner said no, give him his own show. And you know, you can have characters start to be introduced into it, but he needs to be the focus. And they were right ultimately, both Gene and Jeanette. So that's it's complicated.
Thank you.
This is something that's bothered me for a long time, and
Okay.
you don't know the answer. You got the poster right there for Return of the Joker. Do you know why he's green?
Why the Joker's green?
Yeah, he's not green in the movie.
Way to open Pandora's box. but-
No, I know, and I didn't know either, and that bothered me forever, right? So I just found out, like, about a year ago. The Joker was based on The Man Who Laughs, Conrad Veidt. If you look at the poster for that original film, he looks like that. It's a green poster. He's all green and he's got big lips and that's what it's based on. So they go back to the origins. Originally, though, Bruce did a version of this where it was all green, and they kind of objected to that. The marketing people made their own version where they colored it normal and just had the Joker green, which doesn't look as good. It's not as cool as just the whole green tone thing, because that was really what it was echoing. But that's why, because the very first Joker, Conrad Veidt, was green on the poster.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Okay, last one. Now, they just came in and talked to me. Luckily, the 1 o'clock canceled, so we had an extra couple minutes to get through the questions. So after this last question, if you guys want to just gather together, we'll get that selfie together, all right? So go ahead. Make it good.
All right, I think it's a good one. So some of my favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series are kind of some of those non-traditional ones, like the Underdwellers and the episode where Bruce Wayne gets kidnapped and gets thrown into that mine out in the west.
The Forgotten.
The Forgotten, yeah, and the episode with Jonah Hex. That one is barely in there.
The showdown was fantastic, yeah.
And I just love those episodes. I was just curious, how did some of those kind of stranger ideas come about, and what was it like working on those?
Okay, well, it's funny because those were all episodes I didn't really work on very much. Something I was kind of out of the loop.
Well, I know though, like
But I
Showdown,
remember.
Kevin would fight for that because anything with,
Kevin came up with it.
yes, that's kind of his story in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where he was in a room with Bruce and Paul, and they were hashing out ideas, but Kevin's like, what if we have Jonah Hex show up and it's a flashback and this and that, and then this whole thing got, I mean, I don't say he didn't write the whole thing, but it was based on, he got story credit. It was based on his idea, so that's how, the other ones, I don't, I just think they were kind of like, let's show sort of the downtrodden and things like that, and try to deal with stories along those lines. They were sort of socially conscious storylines. But it's funny because I don't remember doing any character designs. I think my teacher did Boss Vegas. So it's like, that's, sometimes people think out of the box and try to do something a little different. So we're not just doing a Joker story or just a comic villain. So that was.
Good question.
Thank you so much.
Good job. If you guys want to meet